"They're coming." The voice belonged to Tam, barely 14 and already braver than most grown men Mira had ever known. He stood at the gap in the stable wall where two boards had rotted loose, one eye pressed to the dark. Outside, the torches of Lord Fenwick's border guard swept across the frozen mud of the hold's central yard, and Mira counted the light without looking. 7 torches, more than last time. She kept her hands steady. Around her in the straw, 7 wolf pups, none older than 6 weeks, all of them orphaned when the border patrol had driven their mother north beyond the boundary wall, pressed together in a breathing pile of gray and brown fur. They were healthy, they were warm, they were hers to protect tonight, and she had exactly as long as it took those torches to reach the stable door. "Tam," she said his name quietly. "Bring the sled." She was not supposed to be here. That was the truth of her life at the border hold. Mira was not supposed to be anywhere she was. She was the pack record keeper's daughter, born to a woman who had died too soon, raised on the charity of a lord who viewed charity as a debt to be collected. She was 23 years old, unmarried, without rank or wolf form. The mate bond that every werewolf in the hold had felt at least the distant pull of had never once stirred in her chest. The other women spoke of it as something obvious, like recognizing your own name called across a field. Mira had never heard it. What she heard instead was Tam dragging the sled through the back passage, and the creak of torchlight moving nearer, and the soft whimper of one small pup who did not understand that silence was survival. She pressed her palm against the little creature's side. "Hush," she said, and meant it as a promise. Mira had planned this for 4 days. 4 days of watching Lord Fenwick's men move through the hold with their tally ledgers, counting resources, counting animals, counting mouths that did not produce. 4 days of understanding that the pups, wolf-born, unregistered, belonging to no pack, would be classified as strays and destroyed before the week's end. Lord Fenwick ran his border hold on the logic of a man who had never once wondered whether a thing had feelings. He was efficient, cold, and entirely predictable, which meant Mira had known on the first day of the count exactly what she had to do. She wrapped each pup in a fold of horse blanket and nested them together on the sled. Tam held the front beam without being asked. Outside, the torches swung left. They had perhaps 4 minutes. "Where are we going?" Tam whispered. "North," Mira said. "Into the Ashwood." He looked at her. In the darkness she could see the specific quality of his doubt. Not fear exactly, but the practical skepticism of a boy who had spent his whole life at the border and knew what north meant in winter. The Ashwood was unclaimed territory. It was also the edge of the High Pack's range. "There's an alpha in those woods," Tam said. "I know," said Mira. "Move." They went through the back of the stable, along the drainage ditch, and out through the gap in the hold's outer wall that Mira had been widening, one loose stone at a time, for 3 weeks. The pups rode in silence. The cold hit them immediately, a hard, flat cold with no mercy in it, the kind that turns breath to fog and numb fingers to wood. But Mira had packed wool wraps and a warming stone from the forge embers, and she tucked it under the blankets before the temperature could reach the smallest pup's belly. Behind them, the torches of Lord Fenwick's men swept into the stable. They were already gone. The Ashwood began 2 miles north of the hold's wall, and it began abruptly, one moment frozen scrubland, the next the first great dark pines standing like sentinels with their arms full of snow. Mira had walked into it once before, at 15, on a dare. She had lasted 20 minutes before the stillness of the place had sent her back out at a run. She had been alone then. She was not alone now, and that made all the difference. The memory came without invitation, as memories do in the cold, when there is nothing to do but move, and the body finds its rhythm, and the mind goes back to the thing it has been circling. She was 16 the first time she saw Hale. Not the first time she had heard of him. Everyone in the border hold had heard of the Alpha's stable hand, the Northern Pack Lord's youngest by a kitchen woman, unacknowledged, given no title and no rank, and put to work with horses because horses do not care about bloodlines. The gossip said he was enormous, that he had already killed 3 men in training bouts and been restrained from killing a 4th. The gossip said his mother had wept when she handed him over to the border hold. The gossip said he had never wept at all. What Mira saw, at 16, leaning over the fence of the south paddock, while a gray horse she had never seen before and would never stop thinking about, stood in the winter light. A young man, perhaps 18, kneeling in the mud beside a horse that had thrown a shoe. His hands on the horse's leg were careful and unhurried. He was talking to the animal in a low, continuous murmur that she could not quite hear, and the horse was standing perfectly still under those hands, not because it was constrained, but because something about his voice made stillness feel like safety. She watched him for 10 minutes. She did not mean to. She had a basket of grain records to deliver to the quartermaster's office, and she was already late, and she stood there with the cold seeping through her boots and did not move. He looked up eventually. She had been half hoping he would not. His eyes were dark, and they found her with the directness of someone used to having nothing to lose from honesty. He did not say anything. He did not look away. And somewhere in Mira's chest, in the place where the mate bond was supposed to be and had always been empty, something moved. Not electricity. Not the luminous crack of lightning that the older women described. Something quieter, a door, long closed, discovering that it was not locked. She delivered the records late. She did not apologize to the quartermaster. She went back to the south paddock the next morning. And the morning after that. His name, she learned, was Hale. He had been at the border hold for 2 years by the time she first saw him, and he would have 2 more before the Northern Pack Lord came to collect the debt he had decided his unacknowledged son represented. In those 4 years, counting from the first morning she went back to the paddock, Mira grew up, and Hale grew into himself, and the thing between them grew in the particular, slow-burning way of things that both people are afraid to name. She was his friend first. That was honest. She brought him grain records that needed counting, and he helped her, because he could calculate faster than anyone she had met, and no one had thought to use that skill. She fixed his torn jacket because the seamstress had refused him 3 times for failure to pay. He taught her to approach a horse from the left and how to read the weather by the way the pines along the north fence leaned, and which of Lord Fenwick's guard captains were genuinely dangerous and which were loud noise and borrowed authority. He was kind. That was the thing she had not expected, given the gossip. He was not soft. There was nothing soft about Hale, but he was thoughtful in the way of people who have paid for their own survival and learned precisely what cruelty costs. When one of the kitchen girls was dismissed without wages, it was Hale who walked to the gate with her and pressed his own week's pay into her hand. When a young wolf pup, born to a pack hand the previous spring, got its leg caught in a fence, it was Hale who spent 3 patient hours working it free without panicking the animal or calling for the blade. Mira noticed all of it. She catalogued it the way she catalogued everything, being a record-keeper's daughter, carefully, without sentimentality, letting the evidence accumulate until the conclusion became undeniable. She was in love with him by the time she was 18. She did not tell him for another 3 years, and she had a reason for every month of those 3 years, and the reason was always some version of the same thing. She was not enough. She had no wolf form. She had no rank. She had no mate bond warmth to offer. only the small cold suspicion that the warmth she felt when she stood near him was hers alone, a private hunger with no answering call. Then came the summer she was 21, and the night of the harvest fire, and the moment when Hale turned from the flames and looked at her across the crowd in a way that she had never been looked at before or since, and said, quietly, so that only she could hear, "I've been trying to find the words for this for 3 years. I don't have them. I think I'm going to run out of time." She said, "You have time." He said, "Lord Fenwick has sold my remaining contract to my father. I leave in 4 days." She did not cry. She was not, by nature, a woman who cried easily. But she felt the door in her chest, the one she had quietly believed was hers and his together, begin to close. 4 days, she said. 4 days, he said, and his hand found hers in the dark, beside the fire, and they did not move apart. 3 of those 4 days were the truest thing Mira had ever known. They walked the fence line at dawn and talked without stopping. He told her about his mother, about growing up in the pack lord's kitchen, about the specific loneliness of being useful to everyone and claimed by no one. She told him about her father's ledgers, about the satisfaction of a column that balanced, about the way she had taught herself to read pack law in the Hold's archive because knowledge was the one thing no one could take when they cleared out your room. He listened the way he had listened to the horse that first day, with his full attention, with his hands still, with his face saying clearly that whatever she said next would not surprise him and would not change anything. On the 3rd night he kissed her, and she understood all at once that the thing in her chest had always been the mate bond and had always been calling to him. She was just a late speaker of that language. He said her name against her hair, Mira. She said his, Hale. "When I've settled," he said, "when I know what position my father will give me, I'll send for you. I swear it." She believed him. That was not stupidity. It was evidence-based trust, built over 5 years of watching him keep his word in small ways and large. She believed him the way she believed a column of numbers, because she had checked the work and it was sound. The 4th day he left before she woke, because Lord Fenwick did not permit sentimental farewells. She found the note tucked into the spine of the pack law volume she had told him about, a single line of his handwriting, the letters more careful than usual, as though he had written it very slowly. The note said, "I will come back for you. H." 2 years passed. No word came. Mira spent the first 6 months giving him the benefit of doubt, which was reasonable because the northern pack was far and communication was controlled, and Lord Fenwick was not above intercepting correspondence. She spent the next 6 months telling herself it was pride, that the northern pack lord had given him enough position to make an approach to a rankless hold woman seem complicated. She spent the third 6 months not thinking about it directly, only noticing the absence, the way you notice a gap where a tooth was, not always, not constantly, but whenever you press that place. By the 2nd year, she had built herself back into a shape that did not require him. She still tended the archive. She had, quietly and without authority, taken on the work of cataloging the Hold's unregistered animals, the strays, the orphaned wildborns, the creatures that fell through the gaps of Lord Fenwick's ledgers. She was useful. She had purpose. The door in her chest was not exactly closed, but she had learned to live with it open without the draft undoing her. And then Lord Fenwick's men had come with their tally ledgers, and she had seen the 7 pups on the list under the heading that meant culling, and she had understood that some things cannot wait for a letter that may not be coming. The Ashwood wrapped around them. Mira navigated by the stars and by the tilt of the slope, which she had memorized from the Hold's surveying records 3 days ago. Tam pulled the sled without complaint. The pups slept in their pile of warmth and would not remember this night. By her estimate, they had perhaps 5 hours until dawn, and perhaps 2 hours before Fenwick's guard reached the outer wall and discovered the gap. She needed to find the High Pack's border post before the cold or the guard found them first. The first sign came at the end of the first hour. A scent marker on a pine at the edge of a clearing, carved at shoulder height, the symbol freshly made. High Pack territory. Mira touched the bark once and felt the formal chill of a boundary crossed. The second sign came 7 minutes later, the sound of a wolf moving through the trees to their left, parallel to their path, not closing, not retreating. Tam went still. "Do we run?" "No," Mira said. "We walk slowly, and we don't show fear." The wolf paced them for 20 minutes. Then it moved ahead, and they followed because there was no other direction that made sense, and the trees opened into a wide clearing with a stone lodge at its center, firelight visible through the shuttered windows, and a man standing on the steps. Her body knew him before her mind caught up. He was larger than she remembered. 2 years of pack work had broadened him, added a weight and solidity to his frame that had not been there at the border hold. He wore no uniform. He wore a gray wool coat, unlaced at the collar, as though he had come outside quickly. His hair was still the same, a little long, a little untended, the specific darkness she had memorized at 16 over a fence post. He was staring at her. Mira, her name in his voice, 2 years, and he said it exactly the same way. The mate bond hit her like a tide coming back in, not violent, not sudden, but so encompassing that she had to plant her feet to stay standing. Every nerve in her body oriented to him. The cold that had been numbing her for 2 hours receded. She felt the mark of his attention on her skin, the way you feel sunlight when you step out of shadow. She did not move toward him. "I need asylum for 7 pups and 1 stable boy," she said. "Fenwick's men will be at the Ashwood border within 2 hours." Something moved in Hale's expression, a quick, complex thing she did not have time to read. He looked at the sled, he looked at Tam, he looked back at her. "Come inside," he said. The stone lodge was warm and firelit, and staffed by 2 pack women, who took Tam immediately into the kitchen, and the pups into a lined crate near the hearth without a single question asked. Mira stood near the fire and let the feeling come back into her hands by degrees, and did not look at Hale. He looked at her. "I sent 12 letters," he said. She turned. His face was doing the thing she recognized from difficult conversations at the hold. Careful, controlled, the jaw set just slightly, the eyes doing all the work. "Fenwick was intercepting them," he continued. "I found out 4 months ago, when one of his outgoing guard captains brought a packet of them to the Northern Pack Lord's court. My father had been holding them as leverage. I didn't know." Mira absorbed this. The record-keeper in her appreciated the specificity. The woman who had spent 14 months in the 3rd phase of grieving him needed a moment. "4 months ago," she said, "I've been trying to come to you. My father refused to release me. I had to. It took time to arrange." 2 years, she said. "I know." He took a step toward her, then stopped. His restraint, she understood suddenly, was not coldness. It never had been. It was the discipline of a man who knew what he wanted badly enough to be afraid of reaching for it wrong. "Mira, I didn't stop. I want you to know that. I want it on the record, whatever record you keep in that head of yours. I did not stop." She looked at him for a long moment. The fire moved. Outside, somewhere in the trees, the wolf that had escorted them through the Ashwood made a single low sound and went quiet. The pups in their crate shifted and settled. "Fenwick's men," she said. "My pack will handle the boundary." He had not moved. You're inside high pack territory. He has no authority here. I know pack law, she said, and something almost like warmth moved through his expression, familiar and specific, the look he had always given her when she surprised him with precision. You always did, he said. She sat down near the fire because her legs had decided. He sat across from her, not beside, respecting whatever distance she was still measuring. Tam appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a cup of broth with both hands and looking between them with the particular acuity of a boy who has survived by reading rooms. Mira pointed at him gently. He retreated. Tell me about the pups, Hale said. She told him, all of it. The tally ledgers, the 4 days of watching, the loosened stones, the sled. She told it the way she told everything, with sequence and detail, without performance. Hale listened the way he always had, and the rhythm of it, her speaking, him attending, the fire between them, was so like and so unlike every conversation they had ever had that she felt the door in her chest widen another inch. When she finished, he said, You loosened those stones over 3 weeks. Yes. Knowing this was coming. I didn't know when. I prepared when I understood the pattern. He was quiet a moment. That's the most Mira thing I've ever heard. The warmth in her chest sharpened. She looked into the fire. I thought about you every day, he said. That's not rhetoric. It's a fact. You can write it down. She said, I know. Because she did. Because the mate bond was not made of nothing, and even from 200 miles away, even intercepted and muted by distance and silence and the specific doubt of a woman who had decided not to be undone, she had felt the direction of him like a compass needle. She just hadn't let herself follow it. I need to ask you something, Mira said. Yes. Your father, the pack lord, the position he gave you. What is it? The silence before his answer was less than a second, but she had been reading his silences for 6 years. Border warden, he said. High Pack's northwestern reach. This lodge. She looked up. He gave you the Ashwood posting. It was the least he could do, Hale said, with the precise flatness of a man delivering an understatement. Given everything. The Ashwood posting was not nothing. It was not a throne, but it was a place, and a rank, and a territory, and a door that had existed in her chest for 6 years suddenly had an address. Mira was practical enough to recognize what that meant, and disciplined enough not to say it yet. What she said was, the pups will need someone to register them with the pack. They're unregistered wildborns. If they're not logged before they're 8 weeks old, they go back into no man's land status. I can register them, Hale said. Tonight, if necessary. It's necessary. The eldest is 6 weeks and 2 days. He almost smiled. The almost smile was worse than the smile. The almost smile was the version she had missed most because it was the one he only gave her. The record keeper's daughter, he said, quietly. Always, she said. They worked through the night. Hale took down the registration information in the pack's formal ledger, names, approximate birth dates, distinguishing marks, and Mira held each pup in turn as he recorded, both of them bent over the table with the firelight between them, their hands close but not touching. The pack women slept. Tam slept on a settle near the kitchen fire. The world outside was cold and still, and entirely uninvolved in what was happening in this room. When the last pup was recorded, Hale set the pen down and did not immediately move back. She was aware of every inch between them. The mate bond had been building through the hours of quiet work until it was a constant low sound in her blood. Not painful, not destabilizing, but impossible to ignore the way a heartbeat is impossible to ignore once you become conscious of it. She had been aware of his breathing. She had been aware of the warmth radiating off him across the table. She had been aware of the exact moment when his hand, reaching for the ledger, had brushed the outer edge of her wrist, and neither of them had pulled back. "Mira," he said. The way he said her name was not the same as 2 years ago. 2 years ago it had been recognition, the sound of a man who had rehearsed a reunion and was discovering the reality. This time it was closer to something unguarded, like a door opening. "I know we're not finished," he said. "I know there's still everything to reckon with. The letters, the 2 years, all of it. I know you're not a woman who moves past things by pretending they didn't happen." "No," she agreed. "I also know," he said, slowly, as though he was choosing the words with the care he had once given to a horse in pain, "that you came north. That you came through the Ashwood with 7 pups and a 14-year-old boy, and you knew this was my posting." She had known. She had known when she found it in the Pack Law Archive, 2 months ago, cross-referencing border warden appointments with Northern Pack records. She had written it down in the column of her mind, under the heading of facts that would matter eventually, and she had not let herself look at it directly until tonight. "I came for asylum," she said. "You came to me," he said. The correction was gentle and entirely accurate. She looked up at him. He was close enough that she could see the line of his jaw, the particular way his eyes moved across her face, as though reassuring themselves of something. His hands were flat on the table, not reaching. Offering. "I'm angry with you," she said. "It was not performance. It was the other, true thing." "I know," he said. "You're allowed." 2 years, Hale. 2 years, he repeated. "And I would undo every day of them if I could. Not because of what it cost me, because of what it cost you." His voice was level, but the cost of that levelness was visible. "You are not someone who should have been made to wait like that. You are not someone who should have had to wonder. I know what wondering did to you, because I know you, and I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm asking you to let me—" He stopped, steadied. "Let me show you it won't happen again." The fire moved. A pine outside sent a gust of snow off its branches, one soft percussion against the roof. Mira looked at his hands on the table. She had thought about those hands 10,000 times in 2 years. The careful way they moved over a horse's leg, over a column of numbers, over the back of her hand beside a fire. She had thought about his hands the way you think about something you are trying to stop thinking about, which means constantly. She turned her hand over, palm up, on the table between them. His hand covered hers. The mate bond did not crash or overwhelm. It settled, like a held breath, finally released, like a column of numbers reaching its total. His thumb moved once across her palm. "I'm still angry," she said. "I know," he said. "And I came through the Ashwood," she said, "on purpose, knowing." "I know that too," he said. She looked up at him, and he was already looking at her, and the thing in his expression was nothing cold, nothing distant. It was the specific warmth he had kept out of his face for 6 years because he was afraid of the cost of showing it, and it was here now, fully visible, making no attempt at restraint. He looked at her like she was the total at the bottom of the column, like she was the solution his entire calculation had been building toward. He stood a half-second after. They were close enough now that she could feel the warmth off his chest through her coat. "Hale," she said. He said, "Yes." "If you make me wait again." "I won't," he said. "Not a day, not an hour." She reached up and touched his jaw with her free hand. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, the way he always had when she surprised him with something tender, as though it required a moment of internal calibration. When he opened them, she was still looking at him. He kissed her with the care of someone who has thought about doing a thing for 2 years and is now doing it with full attention. It was not frantic. It was not tentative. It was the specific warmth of a thing that has been true for a long time, finally being said aloud, and Mira felt it in her chest and her fingertips and the base of her throat, felt the mate bond settle into its correct shape the way a key settles into the right lock. She pressed her palm flat against his chest. His heartbeat was steady and fast. When they finally separated, he pressed his forehead down to rest against hers. "The record-keeper's daughter," he said softly. "You said that already," she said. It deserves saying twice. Outside, the first hint of dawn was a pale gray line above the pines, and in the crate near the hearth, 7 small wolf pups breathed together in peaceful sleep, registered, named, no longer anyone's culling list, under the high pack's roof. Tam was going to wake up in about an hour and eat everything in the kitchen, and then he was going to ask 17 questions Mira would answer with the patience that came from genuine security, and then he was going to ask whether he could stay, and she would look at Hale, and Hale would say yes before the question was finished. But that was in an hour. Right now, the dawn was arriving with the particular quiet of mornings that follow nights of reckoning, and Mira was standing in a room that had, over the course of one long, cold journey, gone from being a stranger's lodge to being the place she had been walking toward for 6 years without knowing its exact address. She stepped back from Hale, not far, and looked at the ledger on the table where 7 names had been written in his hand. She had given him 3 of the names herself. She had been thinking of names for weeks, another column quietly maintained against the day they would be needed. He had not asked where she got them. He asked now. "The names you gave me, where did they come from?" "The Pack Law Archive," she said. "Historic names, used by the founding families. They won't conflict with any current registrations." He looked at her. "You've been planning this for weeks," he said. 2 months, she said, "since I found your name in the warden appointment records." 2 months, he said, and his voice had that quality she recognized, undone by precision. "You found me 2 months ago, and you waited." "I had to make sure of the pups first," she said. "Their situation was time-sensitive." "Mira, the timing worked out." He made a sound that was almost, not quite, a laugh, the restrained version, the version that had always lived in the corner of his expression when she said something that was technically true and entirely maddening. He reached forward and tucked a strand of hair back from her face and left his hand there, warm against her jaw. "How could I not love you?" he said, not to the room, not to himself, to her, directly, plainly, in the way of someone making an official statement for the record. "How could anyone know you and not?" She put her hand over his. "I kept a list," she said. "Of reasons." "I know. You appeared on it repeatedly." "I know that too," he said. "The list is in your favor," she said, "by a significant margin." He kissed her again, briefly, warm. "I'll take it." The dawn came fully. Light moved across the stone floor of the lodge and reached the crate, and in the soft glow of it, the smallest pup raised its head and blinked at the room with the undefended curiosity of young creatures encountering their first ordinary morning in a safe place. It made a sound. Not alarm, not hunger, just presence, just, "I am here, and the world is warm." Mira heard it. She crossed to the crate and knelt beside it and placed one hand in among the pile of small bodies and let them nose her fingers. The smallest pup pushed its blunt face into her palm and went back to sleep. Behind her, she heard Hale move to the door and open it onto the morning, cold and pale and enormous, the Ashwood stretching out under fresh snow, clean and untroubled, the border hold 2 miles south and entirely outside of what mattered now. She heard him say, in the direction of the tree line, something low and authoritative that she could not make out, a pack greeting perhaps, or a boundary confirmed, the particular language of a man who had been given a small kingdom and was standing in the doorway of it on the morning it became real to him. She stayed where she was until the pup shifted under her hand, and then she rose and went to stand beside him in the doorway. The cold came in around them both, and neither of them moved back from it. Hale's hand found hers without looking. The Ashwood was silver and still. Somewhere in its depths, the pack's escort wolf moved through the trees at an unhurried pace, a dark shape between white branches, belonging entirely to this place. "Fenwick will file a complaint," Mira said. "He will," Hale agreed. "My father's court will receive it in about 2 weeks. The pack law on territorial asylum is unambiguous." "I know," said Mira. "I reviewed it." "Before or after you found my posting in the archive?" "Before," she said. "I needed to know it was viable. I'm not reckless." He looked down at her with the specific warmth that had always been his truest expression, the one he had kept out of his face for 6 years and would not need to keep out of it anymore. "You're extraordinary," he said. "I'm practical," she said. "Both," he said. "Always both." She squeezed his hand once, and he squeezed back, and the morning light expanded across the Ashwood floor, and the 7 pups breathed warm and safe behind them in the lodge, and Tam would wake in an hour, hungry and full of questions, and the border hold was 2 miles south and receding, and this was what had been true all along, under every letter written and intercepted, and every night of waiting. Mira and Hale, and the mate bond that had always known its own direction, and the particular ordinary rightness of standing in a doorway together at the edge of the wilderness, choosing the same morning. Tam woke at full dawn, as predicted, and descended on the kitchen with the focused intensity of a boy who had pulled a sled 2 miles through frozen forest and felt the world owed him breakfast. The pack women, Sella and Bryn, Mira had learned their names by first light, fed him without ceremony, which was the right instinct. Tam ate best when no one made a production of it. Mira sat at the kitchen table with a cup of broth and watched him eat, and felt the particular warmth of a morning that had earned itself. Hale sat across from her, not touching, but close enough that the length of his forearm was parallel to hers on the table, and she was aware of it with the low, constant awareness she was beginning to understand was simply what her body intended to feel in his vicinity for the rest of her life. The pups were awake and asking questions with their noses. Sela had brought them a shallow dish of warm broth, thinned to the consistency appropriate for young wolves, and they crowded it with the single-minded devotion of creatures encountering abundance for the first time. The smallest one, the one who had pressed its face into Mira's palm in the early morning, was being shouldered aside by its siblings and approaching the problem from a new angle, working around the outside of the dish until it found a gap. Mira watched this and approved. "That one," Hale said quietly, following her gaze. "The small one." "Petra," Mira said. The name she had given it in the ledger. Petra, from the founding pack records, meaning steadfast. "Fitting," he said. Tam looked up from his plate. "Are we staying?" he asked. Not plaintive, practical, the same tone he had used every time he asked an important question, which was the quality Mira had trusted in him from the beginning. She looked at Hale. "Yes," Hale said, before she could frame the answer. "If you want to." Tam considered this for approximately 2 seconds, which was his version of careful deliberation. "Can I work with the horses?" "That's the primary work of this posting," Hale said. Tam nodded once and returned to his plate with the settled expression of a boy who has arranged his affairs satisfactorily. Mira felt something loosen in her chest that she had not known was still braced. After breakfast, Hale took her out to see the territory properly, not the approach through the dark with torches behind them, but the actual reach of the Ashwood posting in morning light. It was larger than she had imagined from the archive records. The lodge was the formal center, but the territory extended east along the tree line to a natural boundary of frozen creek, and north another mile into old growth, where the pack had maintained signal posts since the founding. The snow was undisturbed in most of it, clean and specific, holding the records of what moved here: deer tracks, the broad paw prints of the escort wolf, smaller things she could not identify, but Hale named without hesitation. He knew this place. That was clear in the way he moved through it, not like someone assigned to unfamiliar territory, but like someone who had spent months learning every inclination of the land until it answered to his attention. He had arrived here alone, and he had made it his. That was who he was, she supposed. He had always been that, a man who could be set down in difficult circumstances and make something habitable of them. She said so. He looked at her sideways. It was easier to make a territory habitable than to make a lodge feel like a home, he said. The territory didn't require someone specific to be in it. She held that. The lodge does now, he said, not a question. It does, she confirmed. They walked the creek boundary in comfortable silence for a time, and the cold was still present, but different from the night before. Less survival, more weather, the ordinary cold of a winter morning that has no particular intention toward you. Mira's boots were damp from the crossing of a patch of snow deeper than it looked. Hale noticed before she said anything and adjusted their path without comment, steering them toward the firmer ground along the bank, his hand at her elbow, and she let him because the gesture was not management but attention, and she knew the difference. At the eastern signal post, she found what she had suspected from the archive records: a pack communication board, a formal one, with the Northern Lord's seal at the header. She read it in 2 minutes. "Your father has forwarded Fenwick's first complaint," she said. "Dated 2 days ago. He anticipated the asylum claim." Hale read over her shoulder. He would. He knows the law as well as anyone. "The response form is here," she said, running her finger along the attached document. "You need to file the warden's counterclaim within 10 days to formalize the asylum." "I know." "You should file it today," she said. "Given the Pups' registration date, the earlier the counterclaim, the stronger the precedent record." He was quiet for a moment. She turned to find him looking at her with the expression she was going to have to get used to, the undone one, the one that appeared when she did something that was simultaneously practical and, apparently, affecting. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Only that I have been managing this posting alone for 8 months, and in 12 hours you have already identified the single most time-sensitive administrative action required." "It was in the archive," she said. "You were always going to be extraordinary at this," he said. It was not flattery. It was the assessment of a man who had watched her work for years and was now watching her apply that work to something that mattered to both of them. At all of it. She looked at the communication board and then back at him. "The counterclaim also has a section for household composition," she said, with the careful precision of someone who was being precise on purpose. "For the warden's formal record, it asks for co-residence." "It does," he said. "You should fill that in accurately," she said, "given that the record will be reviewed." He took the document from the board with both hands, and he looked at it for a moment, and then he looked at her. "Mira," he said. "Hale." Is that you asking, or you advising me on pack law compliance? Both, she said. They have identical outcomes. He did something she had not seen him do in 6 years of knowing him. He laughed. Not the restrained version, not the almost smile, a full, genuine laugh, brief and warm, that changed his whole face and went directly into the column of things she intended to keep. He uncapped the writing pen that lived in the post's supply box, winter cold but functional, and wrote her name into the co-resident line without hesitation. His handwriting on the form was the same as it had been in the ledger last night, in the note left in the spine of her pack law book 6 years ago. Careful and deliberate, every letter fully formed. She watched him write it. When he finished, he held the form up briefly so she could verify. She checked it. It was accurate. Correct, she said. He filed it in the outgoing post box. The seal clicked. The record was made. They walked back through the Ashwood toward the lodge in the full morning light, and the 7 pups would need their midday feeding, and Tam would have already found the horses, and Sella would have questions about supply needs, and the week was beginning in the way that weeks begin, with accumulated ordinary demands that were not burdens but the specific texture of a life that had enough in it to require management. Mira felt the full weight of that, and found it exactly right. Not easy, not resolved of complication, not without the reckoning still due on 2 years of silence and the slow work of trust rebuilt from a sound foundation rather than assumed, but right, built on the correct materials, oriented correctly. The mate bond moved in her chest with the steady warmth of something that had always known where it was going, even when she had not followed. Even when the door had stood open in the cold for 2 long years without the person it had been waiting for coming through. He came through. She had come through. They came back to the lodge together as the smoke rose from the chimney into the white winter sky, and inside, Petra lifted her small head from the warmth of her siblings and made the sound that was not alarm and not hunger but simply presence, and Mira heard it and answered.